success engineering at Rasa, and I'm here with Sebastian from N26, to chat a bit about the bots they're building there. So, Sebastian, could you introduce yourself and what you do at N26?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sebastian Paulenz. I've been with N26 for about 4 years now, and I wear a lot of hats at N26, and currently I am in charge of what we consider chatbot content. That means I decide what intents exist and why they exist. I decide what kind of stories, utterances, and other content we create to handle these intents. And I make sure these, get live on time and in concurrency with the products we release as N26.
Nice. And so what is the journey with this, the bots you're building? What does that look like so far for you?
Well, it's certainly exciting. I can tell you that. So we started, the bot project itself was started at N26 in, I believe, sometime around early 2018. We started building, or at that point, they started building a bot, a very simple one, and that was purely aimed at serving users on Facebook. So we just wanted to get something out of the door quickly to see how people would react, and if the whole chatbot for a bank thing was something that would actually work. We very quickly realized that it can actually work, and people were actually quite excited to talk to it. We also quickly realized that we had a long way to go, and that Facebook was not a good place for a bot to live. So then we put the bot on Facebook in May 2018, played around with it a bit, and again, it worked pretty well. And then we took it offline and released the very first version of the chatbot that at the beginning only spoke English in October of the same year. And after that, we went on to add more languages, because we serve, as N26, we've served the European market and the US now. Yeah. So then we added French and German by the end of that year, and then added support for Spanish and Italian in April 2019. So, nice. And then we added support for our UK market as well, which is also English, but of course, different content because it's a very different banking environment. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And ever since, we have significantly increased the number of intents we have. We have, I'd say, dramatically improved most of the content overall. And we have added a lot of interesting things like deep links that allow users to, from an answer to navigate to like a specific screen in the app or the website directly. And we have made the bot aware of the customer's context. So, we know your name, we know, what kind of membership type you have, where you're from, all these things. Because of course that will also, the more we know about you, that easier it becomes to, give you a meaningful answer.
Absolutely, yeah, that is quite the journey, and it's also been very interesting for us to see how your bot's just growing to a larger user base, different languages, and so on. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, since you are in charge of content and all that, what does the process actually look like when you decide to, say, add a new intent to a bot, for example?
So to explain that, I should maybe start with what where we keep our content and how it's currently organized. We realized pretty early on that having everything on GitHub, especially in a multi-language setup, was not going to work. There were just too many conflicts, too many people, by definition, working on the very same content almost in the same files. So that meant a lot of headaches for a lot of people. I tried to actually merge that stuff, so that didn't work. What we then decided to do is we went with a CMS approach. So we have a content management system in place in which we explicitly define models or model versions,
Right.
both for the core and for the NLU portion. And that also, and we split up everything that exists, or we remove a lot of components from the domain. That means we have a file with individual responses per intent, we have a file with custom actions, stories, tests, and so on. And all these individual pieces are then linked against a model. And only on training time do we then actually fetch this model from the CMS or all the individual files, compile the domain, and then train on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this setup allows us to be pretty much like language agnostic, if you will. So we consider, we make content in English, but we could also make content in French or German or whatever we want to. And then the individual languages are just considered an output layer we add later on.
Right.
So this is pretty much, yeah, what the setup looks like. And that also means that when we want to create an update for our bot, we will basically duplicate an older model, remove the parts that we want to update or have agreed to update, link new parts that we, that need updates against the new model, do the work in that part, and then actually, fetch again from the CMS and train on that.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And yeah, so I mean, you already mentioned a few times that there's multiple different languages, and you said this happens like the language part is actually kind of a higher level thing. So what does it? Is it actually a lot of effort to add a new language apart from creating content, or is that relatively simple?
Well, I'd say the initial setup was, of course, kind of difficult. Not necessarily technically difficult, but just logistically, if you will. So that was hard. But once you can do 2 languages, you can also do 10, right? Once you have the general setup in place, it really doesn't matter anymore how many you need to support. And as we currently support the European market only, like European banking questions are the same no matter if you ask them in France or Spain or Germany or Italy. So you can really just treat language as an output layer. Of course, things get more interesting once you move into the US, for example, where like the types of questions are different, but also the answers are different in a sense. You need different pieces of information from a user and so on.
Right.
But in general, multi-language setup is something, once you have done the initial implementation work, it's pretty straightforward, I'd say.
Yeah. So it really just becomes challenging when you start changing the actual flow of the conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Then it becomes difficult, because then you're also no longer just multi-language, but then you are like, then you're changing not just the language, not just the output layer, but also the conversation itself. Yeah. And so I think you could say that we differentiate between the conversation itself, so the actual back and forth and the individual pieces of information in there, and the individual like output layers of language or the individual intents that we understand from customers.
Cool. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. And so with all these, I mean, since you make a lot of updates and I assume they happen relatively regularly, what kind of testing do you do before pushing out such an update?
So for the NLU part, I think it's pretty straightforward. We do the train test split, which I was told is pretty much an industry standard. So that's what we do. We have a bunch of like individual metrics that we use. We just run it. If the model is not smart enough, we just don't deploy and retrain or add training data. I think that is not very exciting. And I would assume it's pretty much how most people will handle it. Yeah. For the core content part, we do things in, I'd say, 3 steps. So first off, we have a lot of tests on a template or utterance level. So we will make sure that, for instance, that all the URLs we mentioned will actually return it to 100. We will make sure that all the formatting is correct everywhere. We will make sure that all the buttons have proper copy. We will make sure that all our translations are complete, and so on. So we just run a lot of very granular tests on the domain once it's compiled. So to make sure, we are also testing things like, do we actually define the individual values that we then assign to categorical slots? So we're really trying to do, to cover almost everything we can. Then, of course, we're using once we have done this, we usually do that before training time. If all these tests pass, we train. And then, of course, we are using the story tests that you provide. So we are very, we just write lots of them, right? There's nothing else you can do. We just write a ton of them, and then we write even more. And like keeping them updated is not always fun or easy, but it's worth it, right?
Right. Yeah.
We have reached, I think, a degree of complexity where unless you test everything as automated as possible, you're just not gonna be happy. But yeah. And then, of course, we do manual testing, right? There's no way around that. So usually we of course at this point can't test the whole bot and manually anymore. It's just not doable. But we will look at the individual pieces we have changed with the release manually and just see how it's going, also how it flows, how natural the conversation feels, and then either rework or actually release.
Yeah. It's all about making sure the user gets the best experience possible.
Exactly. Right. I mean, there is, we want to make sure that we really do everything to minimize the possibility for errors, right? Yeah. There will always, at some, with some size, small errors creep in, but it's just important that we know this on time.
Yeah. Cool. And so as like a final question, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now and that you're focusing on?
I'd say I like our CMS setup as it is right now. It has served us well. But currently, I'd say one of the biggest challenges is to enable more concurrent work again while still maintaining the level of quality. So if you have a fixed model that you define somewhere in a CMS at some point, it's very hard to parallelize work. So that is something that we need to look into again, because I think the big challenges are going to be like accelerating the time or the retrainings, or like retraining more often, releasing more often, and better supporting N26's business activities in Italy, Spain, and the US. So we want to have more individual content for these markets and do more work in the US as well. And then, of course, I mean, N26 is still a comparatively young company, right? Also, we have grown significantly in the last years. Yeah. And as an organization, it's changing rapidly. Products are changing rapidly. Like we release new stuff almost weekly. So we have to retool some of our setups to, keep up with all that change. Like there's change left and right, and that's of course not easy.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the last thing is there are interdependencies between NLU and core. And for instance, when you think about, you're having an intent X and you want to split this up to make it more granular into like 3 or 4, and then so you need to have specific versions of that for all languages, and then you need specific content that matches that, and just making sure all these individual pieces that can only move ahead in, closer to release together, making sure these all stay connected and on the correct version. That's certainly also challenging now.
Definitely, yeah. It's a very complex system that you've got.
Yeah, it's a very complex system. It's also a lot of fun. So You know, when you press that release button and everything just works and you see your KPIs actually moving upwards every month a tiny bit, then of course that is something that makes you very happy.
Yeah, that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing all these insights. I'm sure that was super interesting for everyone to hear as well. Yeah, to everyone that is watching, we have a live Q&A after this. So if you've got any questions, then yeah, feel free to ask them. So yeah, thanks for chatting with me, Sebastian.
Thank you, and yeah, have a great day.
Awesome.